a copy for yourself of our first module for the final quarter of this school year. All right. So let me now prepare my presentation. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Marinelle, for that. Can you see now my presentation on the screen? I'm not sure. Is it big enough? Can I ask Miles? Is it big enough? Can you see the okay? Because on my screen, my God,
That's good.
it's okay. Let me okay sidebar na lang. Okay, there so that I can see. Okay, here. So this afternoon, we're now on the final session for the week. Now, this particular session is titled Non-Mendelian Genetics, in particular, codominance. So later on, we will discuss how this codominance is somewhat similar, and then also how is this different from incomplete dominance. But of course, let us first establish our goals for this afternoon. Now, take note that all the things that we have been discussing um the since the first session, we're talking about patterns of inheritance, meaning a certain trend, how specific characteristic is, of course, inherited from one generation to the next. And we've learned that so far, in your grade 8, the foundation for this understanding is, of course, the work of, or based on the work of Mendel. However, we also learned that um, as modern technology improve, there are other concepts or other patterns that were observed by other scientists, and they are actually in general called non-Mendelian genetics. And yesterday, we actually learned one of the non-Mendelian genetics, which was um, incomplete dominance. But for this afternoon, we will understand and we will explore more how co-dominants are expressed, or how these particular pattern expressed or manifested on an organism or on an individual. So just a recap, when you talk about Mendelian genetics, it talks about, or it is also known as complete dominance, wherein the dominant allele or the dominant option has the complete ability to hide or mask or prevent the expression of the recessive allele in a heterozygous genotype or a heterozygous phenotype. So let us first summarize, or in comparison, the two concepts. So we have here Mendelian genetics on the left side, and then we have Mendelian genetics on the left side, and then non-Mendelian on the right side. Particularly, I'm focusing here on incomplete dominance. So of course, in terms of the discovery or the start of Mendelian genetic, this is based on the work of Mendel on his observation when he was working with pea plants. However, when you talk about non-Mendelian genetics, it is actually the different works of scientists which further improve Mendel's concept that he was able to establish with his pea plant experimentation. Now, when you talk about Mendelian genetics, it is about complete dominance, while the non-Mendelian genetic talks about partial or incomplete dominance. Now, in terms of the available options, Mendelian genetics is only limited to two possible options. We have a dominant or a recessive. However, yesterday we learned that non-Mendelian genetics, particularly incomplete dominance, it's not limited anymore to two, but instead you have three options. You can have the dominant, the recessive, or the third possible option, which is the blended, a combination of the dominant and recessive allele. Now, of course, we have the dominant allele and recessive allele. Here, our options are, we have a homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and if you have a heterozygous or the blended option, that will result to the third possible option. And then we have, in terms of representation, when you talk about Mendelian genetics, the rule here is that we will use the first letter of the dominant allele. So whichever is the word that is used to describe the dominant allele, the first letter of that word or that descriptive word will be used as the coding for the genotype. However, for the non-Mendelian genetics, in particular, incomplete dominance, I'm emphasizing in particular because later on there's also another different rule for codominance in terms of how we code or we give the genotype or we write the genotype. Okay, so I'm just only comparing the two. So when you have a non-Mendelian genetic or genetics rather, your possible genotypes are either capital A, small a, or both are heterozygous, or you can have a combination of a capital and a small letter. That means it's a heterozygous. Okay? But in terms of letter, you are only using one specific letter, and they only differ in terms of their cases or capitalization. But when you talk about non-Mendelian genetics, in particular, specifically incomplete dominance, we will be using the individual letters, one for the dominant and the other one for the recessive. So example, dominant, let the first letter is D, while the first letter for recessive is R. So you will have a capital DD, that's a homozygous dominant, RR, that's a homozygous recessive. And if you have a DR, that is a heterozygous, meaning, let us say, if it's color, let us say dark and red. So it becomes a third color or the intermediate option, the blended option. Okay, I hope it's clear for everyone. We're able to establish the similarities at the same time, the differences between Mendelian and non-Mendelian genetics, specifically incomplete dominance. So, when you talk about, there are different patterns of inheritance. We're only focusing on two out of the non-Mendelian genetics. So yesterday we focused on incomplete dominance, wherein this particular pattern of inheritance allows the mixing of two the mixing of the dominant alleles and recessive alleles, and then it will result to a third possible option. Okay, so example, red plus white, that will result to pink. Another is you have long and short. Let us say it will result to medium length. Let us say you have black and white, it will result to gray. So that's for incomplete dominance. Now, this time, this afternoon, we'll focus on codominance. So I actually showed this picture to you yesterday. So probably you have noticed something on the picture or in the image. Okay, so I will discuss that later on. So we're done with incomplete dominance, and then we have codominance. So take note when the word, I believe you have encountered the prefix co. Example, co-worker, co-teacher, co-founder. The prefix co actually means there's a sense of being together or you're working together, just like co-worker, co-teacher, meaning you are teachers from the same institution. And example, co-founder, if there are at least five founders for that particular company or group, all of these individual founders, they call themselves co-founder because they are more or less equal in terms of the ownership or the ownership or the realty of they have on that particular group or organization. So when you talk about co um together or equal, so in that sense this will actually give us already a hint of what we mean when we say co-dominance. So when you talk about codominance, it's another pattern of heredity or a pattern of inheritance, wherein the possible options for that particular characteristic or trait is expressed equally. So that means we don't have a distinct dominant allele and a distinct recessive allele. They actually don't have, or one allele does not have a true superiority over the other, meaning that they can be expressed together on that particular genotype if they appear in a heterozygous condition. So both alleles will equally appear on the offspring or on the individual that is heterozygous. So let me go back to this example. So you have here a characteristic called um, cow hide, meaning the body covering of the cow. It's actually the actual skin of the cow, but of course it's not similar to the skin of humans because it's not that thick. Our skin is not that thick, and their skin actually is used for leather. So anyway, so cows, body covering of a cow can be tinted in red or can be tinted in white. All right. So your options are either white or red. But what do you notice on a heterozygous here? Can you describe this particular cow? So this is a homozygous and this is another homozygous. Now this here on the middle is a heterozygous. So how do you describe based on what you can see on the body covering of this cow? Yes, Marinelle? Yes, Marinelle, you're raising your hand. How do you describe?
I Hindi mo answer, sir.
Yes, go.
It has both colors, sir, but not mixed. Not
Okay, very good. So instead of seeing the colors, mixed color of red and white like pink, instead, according to Marinelle, you can actually see both colors, but they are in a form of spots or a form of pattern on the cow, on the cow's hide or cow's body covering. Okay, so there are spots of white, and then the rest of the body is covered in red um, body covering, or let us say a fur. Okay, but it's not as thick as a fur. Pareha man siya og skin sa tao na in a way na shorter ang iyahang body covering. So anyway, so very good, Marinelle, that you were able to see and of course express that observation on this particular heterozygous genotype. So going back, or let's continue. So, I sorry. Okay, here. Let me cover. So, I have here um a scenario wherein both we have here two parent plant. We have a homozygous dominant red and a homozygous dominant white. Now, what we want to do is we would like to check if you really understood how incomplete dominance and how codominance are expressed on a particular offspring. So let us say ang red, that's parent 1, and the white flower is another parent, parent 2. Now, let us say they were allowed to pollinate. Okay, so reproduction between two plants. So then it resulted to two possible options or result, let us say. Now my question here, between the two possible option, which shows incomplete dominance and which possible result shows codominance? So let us say this one, result A, which is in pink, and this one is result B, which is a combination of red and stripes of white. So let's start with incomplete dominance. Which of the two result is an example of incomplete dominance? A, which is yes, Ian?
Ay sorry sir, ang
It's
pink sir.
okay. Pink, okay. Um, how about letter B?
Codominance.
Codominant. So we have Ian, according to him, and Isa, flower A is the incomplete dominance. And according to Miles, the result B, which is, as you can see on the screen, you have a flower and parts of the petal actually has red and then with strips of white. So let us see if our answers are correct. Indeed, it's correct. So remember, incomplete dominance is blended. So that's the keyword, blended, combined. So whichever is the characteristic available, let us say color, length, texture, shape, you need to predict its possible blended characteristic or blended option for the heterozygous. But when I say codominant, since they are equal, that means both colors or both options are expressed together equally on the organism. So you have here red at the same time white on picture A, which is on the picture B, which is on the right side. So I hope that's clear to everyone. So if ever you still need help in terms of understanding codominance, on our module you will see there the video reference or video link which you can click and then of course watch during your most convenient time. So again, when you talk about codominance, it's a pattern of inheritance wherein the two alleles or the two options are fully expressed together equally on the organism, given that it's a heterozygous or the organism is a heterozygous um, or has an heterozygous phenotype and genotype. So that means neither of the allele are considered recessive. They have equal superiority over each other. So here, as you can see, another possible example, this is more on theoretical. You have red and blue. Okay, red and blue. And then, of course, instead of what's a possible result, if this is incomplete dominance, what's the color if we combine red and blue? According to color, sa tawagan na, color philosophy. Okay, violet. Okay, very good. So, violet. So, kung incomplete pa ni siya, if your options are red and blue, you expect that the third option will be violet. However, since this is an example of a codominance, you will notice that you don't see the color violet on the options. Instead, this flower here is predominantly na ay blue, at the same time na ay strips of red. Or you can also have it other way around, wherein predominantly of the parts of the what do you call this, the flower is in red and naa din siya strips of blue. Regardless of the pattern or the regardless of which is more observable or covers more surface area on the petal, what is important is that both colors are observable or expressed on the organism. You have blue parts at the same time red parts of the flower. Okay. So the question now is how do we properly represent the coding, okay, the coding for our codominance. 'Di ba? So far, one letter but different in terms of cases, that's Mendelian genetics. Incomplete dominance, first letter of the dominant, first letter of the recessive. So for codominance, as I've mentioned a while ago, it will also have its own specific rule in terms of how we represent its code or genotype. So here, we only have one specific rule, and that is to use the capital letter as of the individual alleles, sorry, the capital letters of the trait, and then the superscript or exponent for the contrasting allele. So let me, sure, very confusing. Let's dissect this rule. So let us say we have this particular scenario as our example for codominance. You have red flowers and blue flowers. Now, my first question, based on that statement, what is the trait? What about the plant are we focusing on? If you have red flowers and blue flowers, what does it describe about the plant?
Color.
Anyone? Yes? Yeah, Miles?
Their color.
Okay, the color of what particular part of the plant?
Of the petals.
Okay, the petals or to be general flower. Okay, so we can say that the trait here, the overall characteristic is it talks about the flower color. And your options are red and blue, right? Now, what's the first letter for the trait flower color?
Ah,
Letter F. Right. Obviously, it's letter F. Okay? So that's why I highlighted it um with yellow. Now, what are the contrasting options or alleles? Unsa man ang mga available options about the flower color?
Red or blue.
Okay, correct. Correct, Marinelle. We have red and blue. Same thing. The first letter of red is R, while the first letter of blue is B. Now, how do we put that together? Take note, the trait will be your base. So, imagine kana itong mathematical equation, di ba na ay base, and then beside that, you have the exponent or the superscript. Do we call it numerical coefficient? Then sa ibabaw ang exponent. So that means your base or your numerical coefficient is your trait. In this case, it's letter F. While your contrasting alleles will act as your exponent. So your options are either R or B. So let's apply that. So you have here, let us say, red, homozygous red. So let me give you an example. Sorry, let me give you here. So looking at this first example, you have a homozygous red, meaning all of the petals of this particular flower are all red. So remember, F is the trait because it's about flower color. While since this is a homozygous red, of course, FR, remember, they must be written as a pair. The FR there is actually one, and this one here, FR, is another. So you have two combinations. So it's a homozygous red. Now, what about if you have a homozygous blue? What do you think is the coding for this one?
FBFB.
Okay, FB, FB. Because this time, the superscript or the exponent is talks about blue, homozygous blue. But the base or the numerical coefficient or letter coefficient in this case, F, is the same because it still talks about the flower color. Now, what about if you have a heterozygous? Meaning, this plant has red parts on its petals and also blue parts on its petals. What do you think will be the corresponding genotype? Iyahang code.
FRFB.
Okay, very good. So you have FR, that's for red. FB, that's for the coding for blue. Okay, question. Okay, napaka question. Yes, Miles.
Sure nga no, balik-balik ang red allele, blue allele, FR, FB, FB.
Okay, homozygous man siya. Remember, in a genotype, they are written as pair. So this is one. Kung if you take this as a as a Mendelian genetic, this is capital R. This is capital R. But since this is an incomplete dominance, the way it is represented, dapat daw naa ang trait. That's why it's R. Oh, F. FR, FR. And here, homozygous siya, red tanan. This one, homozygous blue siya tanan. And here, you have red parts and blue parts. This is a heterozygous. So this is one letter combination. This is another letter combination. It's just that complicated lang ang iyahang representation. Naa siya'y base and then naa siya'y superscript or exponent. Okay? Okay, I hope that's clear now. So let us say if we have this one. This time we're talking about feather color. And your options are either blue or white. Okay, blue or white. Meaning na ay feather na tanan blue, napoy bird na tanan niya feather white, napoy bird na ay some some feather are blue while some feathers are white. So let's start. What's the letter for the trait?
F.
F. Feather color. This time it talks about feather color. What are the contrasting options?
Blue or white.
Blue or
Blue
white.
or white. So B for blue, W for white. Now what about if you have a homozygous blue feathered bird, meaning tanan parts sa bird kay blue, covered with blue feather. So
F.
FB. Correct. Okay, Miles. Now what about white?
FW.
FW,
FW.
FW.
Okay, FW. But if your bird has blue feathers at the same time white feathers, take note, dili ba ni siya gi-combine? It means they are expressed together. Unlike sa katong incomplete dominance wherein blue and white, sky blue lugar dapat. But here, it's a different pattern. They are both on or they are both expressed on the organism. So you have blue parts and white parts. So how is that? So here, we have a bird completely covered with blue feather and it's a homozygous blue. While another possible pattern is that it's a homozygous white, tanan feather sa bird kaay white. So you have a homozygous white. But there's also a third option wherein, as you can see on this theoretical or imaginary bird, ang iyahang head and wings part are covered with blue feathers, but ang iyahang main body is covered with white feather. That means some parts of the bird are blue and some parts of the bird are covered with white feather. So together, na ay blue, na apoy white. Okay, any question regarding how this is done or how do we code? Clarification? Wala na? Okay. So let me go to the next. So this time we will do the problem sets. Is here. By the way, the problem set are all found on our module. Okay? So you can read on that later on. So let's focus on what is being asked on that particular problem set. And then for every problem set, we also have our supporting or guide questions. Okay? So here, as you can see, this particular problem talks about the color of the cow hide. Taas kayo siya, no? But it talks about color. So C. All right? So, what are the possible alleles or option and their individual or corresponding codes? Remember, it's very important that we need to know how to code or represent them properly. So here, in this case, you have three options: two homozygous and two homozygous and one heterozygous. So you have here red-haired cow, and then we have here another white-haired cow, while the other one is, as you can see, has spots of white on a red, um, majority of the covering is red, but there are spots of white. So we call this condition as roan-haired cow, meaning naa siya'y spots of contrasting colors. So red or white. So we have red, that's a homozygous red. C came from the trait. RR is from the red hair. Now, how do we write the white-haired cow? How do we write its coding? Anyone who wants to try? If CRCR, that's for red-haired cow, how do we represent a white-haired cow? Meaning wala.
CW, CW.
Okay, perfect. So CW, CW. Now, what about if you have a roan-haired cow? Meaning na siya spots of white and naapod siya parts of red. How do we write its code? Yes, who wants to try?
CRCW.
Okay, correct. Perfect. So this is roan. Roan has white parts and red parts. So CR, CW. Klaro na ta on terms of how they are represented, how they are coded in terms of their combination, letter combinations. So let's go back to the problem now that we have um, visualized our trait and their available options together with their codes. So in this particular problem, we have of course two parents. We have parent A, we do not know which is female or male. Wala gi-indicate sa problem. But what we know is that parent A has a round hair or is a round hair cow. Round hair cow meaning na siya spots of red and white. While parent 2 is a homozygous red-haired cow. So how do we write their genotype? Anyone who wants to try with a parent A? Round hair cow.
CRCW, sir.
Okay, very good. How about a red-haired cow, meaning a homozygous red-haired cow?
CRCR, sir.
Correct. So here, so it's very important, it's very crucial that you know how to write their correct corresponding genotype because this is actually our starting point for the next. So we have one parent, roan, meaning na siya red and white, and then the other parent is purely red, meaning all of the body covering is tinted in red or tinted with red. CRW, that's parent 1. CRCR, that's for parent number 2. Now, let me reveal the first quadrant. CRCR. Is this red-haired, white hair, or round hair cow?
Red.
Red.
Red or homozygous red, or if you want to be just in general, red-haired. Okay, how about the second quadrant?
Roan.
Roan.
Roan, meaning na siya red and white. Okay, how about the third quadrant?
Red.
Pure red or red-haired or homozygous red, depending on how you describe it. And then lastly,
Roan.
Roan.
Roan. So how many combinations, letter combinations you see on the Punnett square? One, two, or three?
Two.
Two. We have CRCR, correct? Jade and Candy. And then we have CRCW. So that means our possible offspring can be described as homozygous red-haired cow or a heterozygous round-haired cow. Do we have a homozygous white? Is that a
No.
possibility? No, it's not possible for this set of parents. Okay, so we have CRW and CRCR. And then, the question now, the final question. What is the chance or the probability that you will get a round haired cow?
50%.
50%.
Okay, 50%. Or you can also say, yes, Candy and Sophia. You can also say 2 out of 4 or 2 over 4, depending on how you write the percentage. What about if I ask, what's the chance that you will have white? How do you?
Zero.
0.
0. Or you can also say that it's an impossible, correct, Jade and Candy? It's an impossible event, meaning it's not possible for this set of parents. All right. So in this case, I'm only asking for Ron. So that's 2 out of 4 or 2 over 4. Or you can also say 50% chance that the offspring of this set of parents will have roan hair or will be roan haired cow. Okay, question for the first problem set. Clarifications? Anyone? Wala na? Okay, so let me go to the next slide. So here, there are three options, right? Homozygous white, homozygous red, or a heterozygous roan. But for this set of parent, our options are only limited to the two, two out of the three, a homozygous red and a heterozygous roan. Okay, let's go now to the next problem set. Okay, this time this talks about chicken. So mura na nig Farmville ang atong problem set. So there's a particular species of chicken wherein complete dominance is actually observable. So in this case, it talks about the color of the feather or feather color. And we have black or white as our options for the homozygous. And then if you have a heterozygous, we call this erminate. Erminate, meaning there are black and white feathers. So let me give that here. So we have a black, so tanan black feather. So kanang mga living in rural areas right now, and you have kanang bigger space, 'di ba? Some of probably your parents opted to grow your own um livestocks. So probably you've encounter kanang naay mga farm diha, mga mayamanin, RK, naa sila'y extra space for mga livestock. So here, so as you can see here on this actual example of this species of chicken, naagid siya individual feathers that are white and some feathers are purely red. Ay sorry, purely white. So mura siya og Dalmatian. Are you familiar with Dalmatian? So it's the Dalmatian version of a chicken. Na siya mga black feathers. As you can see, mura siya og black spots. All right. So we call this condition or this heterozygous condition as erminate, meaning na siya black and white na mga feathers. So, let's check if you understood the correct coding. So I'll do the first one. The trait is about the feather color. So F will be our base. It's all about the base. And then our options are either black or white. So if you have a homozygous black chicken or a black chicken, FB. Murag balik-balik lang siya, no, ang ilahang combination, but they actually mean specifically based on the given problem. Now, how about kay white?
FW.
FW, FW.
Okay, FW. How about for the erminate?
FB.
FB, FW.
Okay, so heterozygous siya. Okay, so I hope that's clear to everyone how we got the base, which is letter F, from feather color. And then we have B for black, B for black, W for white. Okay, so we have here, um, if two parents daw are erminate, meaning both parents are heterozygous. Okay? So meaning we don't know which will of course silang duha the hen and the rooster are both heterozygous erminate chicken. So we have FBW, FBW. So that's for our individual parents. So let's put them here. Okay, I need your help in this one. So first quadrant, we have FB, black, white, or erminate.
Black.
Black.
Black, correct. Very sure, black. How about the second quadrant FBFW?
Permanent.
Okay,
Permanent.
erminate, meaning it's the heterozygous, the Dalmatian, the Dalmatian looking chicken. Okay, how about the third quadrant?
Permanent.
Okay,
Permanent.
another erminate, heterozygous. And then lastly, on the fourth quadrant, we have FW. This will have what color of the feather?
White.
White. Okay, correct. It's white. So how many combinations do you see on the Punnett square? One, two, or three?
Three.
Three, correct. Candy, Aliana, and Sophia. So this time, the homozygous, black and white, at the same time, the heterozygous erminate is express or a possibility for this set of parents. So, we have a homozygous black, homozygous white, and then a heterozygous erminate. So, of course, we simply write down the individual genotype. All right. You have FB, FW, and then FB. So here we have two questions for this problem. The first question is, what's the probability that you will have black chick or black chicken or chicken with black feathers? Okay, yes, Candy, Aliana, and Sophia, all the three of them wrote on our comment section 25 or 25%. Do you agree on that? Okay, so it's actually, if you look at the Punnett square, that's 1 out of 4 or 25%. So black. What about white?
25%.
Okay, it's also 25%. Now, in this set of parent, which of the possibilities has the higher chance or probability? Black, white, or the erminate?
Permanent.
Okay, nga naman siya higher? What made you say it's higher or has a higher chance or probability?
Based upon its welfare, actually
Okay.
50% chance.
Okay, very good. That's one. Or based on the Punnett square, it has also 2 out of 4 chances. Higher compared to black or white. So meaning, among the three options, naagyapoy mas favored, which is the heterozygous condition or the erminate. Okay, question for the problem set number 2. Anyone? Question? Clarifications? Na pa ba? Before we go to the next slide?
Unsure.
Okay, okay, wala na. So please take note, there is also another source there wherein you can actually check up your understanding between codominance and incomplete dominance as part of non-Mendelian inheritance or non-Mendelian genetics. Now, please take note before I forget and take too much time here. Last time, di ba, nanubro ko sa time. So, please take note, week 2, which is on March 14 to 18, our um, tentative or more or less, this is actually our time frame for that week. We have, of course, for session 1, we have our dedicated worksheet or exercise about incomplete dominance. Okay, so that means you will be answering a particular task or worksheet or a questionnaire on the SELEAD. And then session 2, focus on codominance. And then so session 3 we'll have a home experiment. So please take note. Um, we have already mentioned or specified the materials that you will be needing for the home experiment. Don't worry, the materials that you will be needing are, of course, readily available at home, or we also mentioned there an alternative for the materials if ever you don't have it. Unsay pwede na substitute or alternative. And then lastly, for week 2, we will end our week with long test number 1. So that means please prepare for our summative test. Okay, questions, clarifications? Wala na?
None, sir.
Okay, so please take note of that. Again, please, I highly encourage everyone to download our modules so that you can go through the individual session and, of course, know what to anticipate or what to expect for each session, especially for the home experiment. Okay? So if there are no more questions, we are now experiencing a better weather condition. So hopefully this will continue throughout the weekend so that we will enjoy the weekend without the rain. I don't know kung mga rain individual mo. Ayaw og tuo ana sure kay nag-ulan na diri. Ay nagtuo na nag-ulan na diri sa inyo ha. Sorry na good here ah, sa syudad. I mean city proper. I belong to the city proper man. Nainit na, naugan na among nilabhan. Okay, ang beddings, dili na bare ang beddings, nalaugan na. So anyway, what is important is of course we are safe and of course we're productive inside our in the comforts of our home. So everybody, take care and God bless. See you tomorrow for our final HR session. Okay? Take care and God bless. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Stay safe everyone.
Advice